So wisdom tales, known as folk tales, live on in cultures all over the world. Within each beloved story, there's often a profound message or two. So many of us hear folk tales when we're growing up, but even when we're adults, it's important to pause and listen to old stories. The tale I want to share with you today is an old one from Kazakhstan. It's a lovely illustration of the power of friendship and ultimately compassion. It starts like this. Once upon a time, there was a farmer. His name was Hassan, and a shepherd who was called Hassan. Hassan and Hassan were best friends. One year, the two experienced a desperately cold winter. Everything froze. In fact, the land became so frozen that Hassan's many sheep were unable to break through the ice to reach the grass underneath it. The whole flock of sheep died of starvation. In tears, Hassan went to his friend Hassan and said, "My sheep have perished. I cannot survive without them. So, good friend, I am leaving. Goodbye." Hassan would not hear of Hassan's departure. He said, "No, you can never leave. You are my friend. You shall have half my land, and together we will share it." Shocked, Hassan said, "Oh, my dear friend, Hassan, you are very kind, but I simply cannot take your offer. Your field is already small. It'll just make it smaller." Hassan said, "Speak like that no more. You are my good friend, and I don't want you to leave. Now, what you say is true. Yes, we will have less than before, but we will have enough for both of us." Hassan, I will not take no for an answer. Feeling greatly relieved, Hassan shook his head up and down and accepted Hassan's offer. So the two friends hugged each other. The shepherd did not leave, and the farmer was pleased. Time passed until it was many years later. Hassan was working the field when clunk, his shovel hit something. Clunk, his hoe hit something when he was digging it out. Something hard in the ground. Hassan dug a little deeper and pulled an old pot out of the dirt. He lifted the pot, took the lid off of it, and glowing inside this dark pot was a whole bunch of gold coins. His eyes grew big when he saw the coins. Lots and lots of gold coins. The shepherd yelled, "Hassan, Hassan, you will not believe what I just found. You, my friend, are rich." The farmer walked over, smiled at Hassan, looked in and said, My friend, that's not my gold. It's your gold. After all, you found it on your own land. You are rich." Hassan said, "You have given me enough. Take your treasure." You know where this is going, right? Your treasure. Your treasure. I told you to keep it. It is on your land. Hassan and Hassan began to argue. For the first time, the two friends could not agree with one another. So they decided to seek advice from the wise one. I love old folk tales when they go seeking the advice of the wise one. That doesn't happen a lot these days. So the wise one sat in a yurt. And many of you know a yurt is a round kind of tent. And in that yurt, there were 4 students who were seated around the wise one. So to honor the wise one, the farmer and the shepherd bowed low. Hassan and Hassan explained their problem. The wise one listened and sat in silence for a long time after the two friends talked. So the wise one then turned away from the two visitors and looked to the first student. "Here's an interesting dilemma. What do you think these two should do?" The first student answered immediately, "Well, the solution is really quite apparent. Since they cannot agree, the gold should go back to the ground where it was buried." The wise one frowned. Turning to the second student, the wise one said, What do you suggest?" "Well, since the two brought you the gold, you should keep it." "I see," said the wise one. Turning to the third student, the wise man said, "And you, what do you say?" The third student said, "Well, the gold was buried in a field, and we all know that the field is located in the kingdom of Khan. So let Khan keep the gold." The wise one's face contorted with an expression of great concern. Lastly, the wise one turned to the fourth. This was the youngest student. And the wise one said, "What do you advise?" Now, it's an interesting thing in this story, right? We have this elder sage. We have these two adults who are arguing, good friends. We have these young people who are being asked about advice. And in this part, the very youngest is asked to give advice. So the child named Armand was visibly caught off guard. Armand, who was awakened from a daydream, said, "Well, if you ask me what I suggest," and yes, you did ask me what I suggest, "I have to say we should buy seeds with the gold. Then we could plant a great, big, bountiful garden." With immense enthusiasm, Armand described a magnificent place where people could rest and play, where animals and birds could make their homes, where wildflowers could grow, trees could flourish, bees and butterflies could find happiness. With tears of joy welling up in the wise one's face, the teacher responded, "You have made a good decision." So turning to the two friends, the wise one asked, "Do you agree?" Hassan and Hassan eagerly agreed. They said, "Yes, let's have a garden." The wise teacher instructed the young student to take the gold coins to the capital city and buy the best seeds to plant in their garden of dreams. Happily, Armand set off to accomplish a great goal. The young one walked the dry, dusty trail for many days. Finally, Armand arrived at the bustling royal city, where every sound and color imaginable permeated the air. Merchants were everywhere, selling wild and wonderful things. There were many people speaking different languages and wonderful things. The aroma of the pungent incense made Armand sneeze. At last, the gold-bearing young student bumped into a seed seller. While peering at the many seeds in the bag, the student heard this terrible screeching sound over to the right. Turning to see what was causing it, Armand saw a caravan of cages strung together. Filled within those cages were birds of every kind. The feet and the wings of those birds were tied down. The creatures were dusty, sandy, and miserable looking. Armand couldn't stand it. She puffed up her chest and walked up to the caravan leader, and she said, she was very scared, by the way, very frightened. She tried not to show it. She said, "You there, what are you doing with those beautiful creatures?" The camel driver who had all of the cages gestured and boasted loudly, "These birds are for the table of Khan, to provide meat to eat and feathers to adorn the palace. I have the rarest ones in the kingdom." Armand could not believe the man could be so heartless. Opening her bag, Armand said, "Look, I will give you all of these gold coins if you will let the birds go." Seeing the gleam of sunlight on all those bright coins, the caravan leader said, I'm going to get a better deal here. Sure, I'll do this. Obviously, the child has no idea how much money she was giving up. "Fine, they're yours. Take them," said the caravan leader as he grabbed Armand's bag and quickly departed. Armand carefully untied the strings from the wings and the feet of the birds. Some of them were so weak they couldn't fly. So Armand held their little claws, their wings, massaged them until soon the birds were lifted to the air. They grew strong. Each time Armand watched a bird fly away, her heart grew larger with love for them. At last, she smiled and turned to leave for home. She walked the long journey back, and as she neared home, it occurred to her what she had done. She said to herself, "You fool! Look what you did. That gold was not yours to give away. It was meant to buy seeds." She dropped to her knees, put her face in her hands, and wept, saying, "What am I going to say to my teacher and the two friends who asked for my advice?" Nearby, a rosy starling caught the woeful cries of the student. Then the bird flew away. Soon there was a rush of activity above Armand's head. The air was filled with wings and brilliant feathers of all kinds. Bird after bird neared Armand and sang, "You cared for us. You saved our lives. Now we want to help you." Armand looked around in astonishment. The whole area of land was busy with birds. They were scratching the dirt and pecking the ground, preparing the land for planting. Falcons arrived from distant lands, their beaks packed with exotic seeds. Using all they had as tools, the birds fluttered their wings and used their tiny claws to scratch the earth and plant the seeds. The eagles used their strong talons to dig out ponds, and the pelicans brought water to fill those ponds. Isn't this wonderful visual for those of you who can picture this? Armand sat for a while, enchanted by all this activity. When she stood, the birds flocked together and flew upward to the sky as one. Then, like magic, the seeds began to sprout. In less time than one could blink an eye, stalks grew into trees, and the branches were covered in blossoms. The blossoms fell, and apples emerged from the branches, round and shiny as gold coins. Poppies and tulips covered the grassy areas. Vegetables popped up, and paths wove between tranquil pools of water. Birds reappeared and sang 100 songs. Armand thought it all might be one of her many daydreams. This can't be happening. So the child picked up a golden apple and carried it back to the wise one's yurt. Thrilled to see Armand, the wise one hugged the young student. Without a breath between words, Armand told the wise one about the garden and held up the apple for the wise one to see and to taste. Indeed, it was the best apple ever. The wise one sent Armand to bring Hassan and Hassan to the garden. When they arrived, the good friends smiled at each other. This was the right thing to do. Soon, people of all ages gathered, rested, and played together in the garden. The fresh water and the fruit nourished their bodies, and the sound of 1,000 birds singing sent their spirits soaring. Such is the story of the magic garden. The kind child, the generosity of two friends, and the birds that saved it all. So this ends this part of that story this morning. As you prepare to go about your week, I hope you might pause to reflect on 3 themes that came out in this story. 1, when you find a treasure, consider with whom you will share it. 2, in our society, we are so independent and self-sufficient that we think we have to come up with all of the answers to every quandary on our own. Taking some time to explore options expands possibilities. In this story, the wise one never once said, "What a stupid idea." It was like, that's a thought, that's a thought, that's a thought. Third, I love a master plan as much as anyone, ever. However, a last-minute change that arises from an act of love and compassion. Granted, that child was on a journey to get this task done, and along the way, that changed because of that child's compassion and love for the suffering that she witnessed. Last-minute changes that arise from an act of love and compassion, such as releasing those captive birds, provided a richer outcome than could possibly have been envisioned. I know the rational part of us saying, that's ridiculous. Stuff doesn't just grow to the ground in a minute's time. And I realize that. There's imagination going on. But the picture is the bigger picture. The question I'm asking is, and there's no right or wrong answer. It's just something to ponder this week. Do you believe the universe has a way of assisting generous outcomes that we human beings cannot possibly imagine? Do you believe the universe has a way of assisting generous outcomes that we human beings cannot possibly imagine? In the meantime, might you and I consider it our calling, that is, our quest of the Spirit, to save the world by undoing one hurtful action every day. Blessed be and amen. Thank you for your kind attention.